So what is this STEM lab?
We've done a whole bunch of different things that are around STEM, art, sort of mechanics, engineering, all of that stuff. We both went into this being transformational. How are we going to move that needle? How are we going to measure some outcomes?
The skills that they're learning in this lab are the skills that will help elevate them to jobs and career success.
Thanks for joining us on this week's BizCast, powered by Google. Today we are on the road. We are here in Bridgeport at the Wakeman Boys and Girls Club on Madison Avenue. We are joined with Wakeman Boys and Girls Club CEO Sabrina Smeltz and ASML Program Manager for Society and Community Engagement, Brian Amero. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being here. We're really excited about this space. I know I walked in and was absolutely stunned. But we're going to get into the space a little bit more.
Sure.
But first, give us a little bit of background about the Boys and Girls Club and specifically this clubhouse.
Sure, yeah. So Wakeman Boys and Girls Club, we're going in to celebrate, we're in our 111th year of being an organization. We started in Southport, Connecticut, which is a part of Fairfield, Connecticut. About 15 years ago, we came into the community in the city of Bridgeport, where we opened our first location on Fairfield Avenue in the West End. And just over a year ago, we opened this location, our Madison Ave Community Clubhouse. We opened to kids on October 2nd in 2023. And so now we're a little bit over a year in and running some amazing programs. We actually have programs from 3-year-olds all the way up to 18. So we have an early learning preschool center and then after school programs, sports programs, and really exciting to talk about our STEM and science programs and sort of all of those things that we have. And I say it's a community center, it's a partnership, and it's an awesome space. So
one of those many partners, ASML. Tell us a little bit about, ASML, big name here in Connecticut. Sure. Talk to us a little bit about that and then how you got involved here.
Yeah, absolutely. So ASML, we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We are a Dutch company, originally started as an offshoot of Philips in a shack with a leak on the roof. And here we are today, 40 years later. We have locally here in Connecticut, we have 3,300 full-time employees in Wilton. Our site in Wilton is the largest site outside of our corporate headquarters in Veldhoven, the Netherlands. And we are in the advanced lithography industry. We make the machines that make microchips. We don't actually make the microchips ourselves, but we make those machines. And we have partners like Samsung, Intel, who use our technology to make the microchips that power the world around us.
And so workforce, obviously here in Connecticut and around the world, I'm sure, but it's very important to you.
Absolutely.
And building your future workforce. Tell me about when you first got connected with Sabrina or when ASML did and how this partnership began.
Sure. Yeah. So my role at ASML is relatively new. I started in 2022 and we did not have a lot of community partners in the region. So a lot of the partners that we have today are relationships that were built organically from the start of my time there. Sabrina and I actually go way back to the beginning of our careers. And I had discovered that she had made a pivot in her career and was here at Wakeman. And we at ASML have relationships with the Boys and Girls Club on the West Coast. I was looking for some inroads here locally, and I reached out to Sabrina, and it was amazing to reconnect, and then also just kind of looking at where the organization was in the process of building this space and thinking about the resources and the expertise that ASML has to offer. It was really just a very natural and very quick partnership.
So small world, literally.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Taking you both now in your careers where you are, creating this partnership, and you had an opportunity here for this center. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this was, again, a partnership. I think I say a lot with our teams, like you can't do this alone. We have some areas of expertise that we're able to do, but this project, this building was a 9-year project. The city of Bridgeport is a partner. We sit on the city of Bridgeport land. We own the building, but it was state funds, private funds, and foundation funds that helped us put this all together and then develop developing this with partners. So we have other partners that are inside our building with us. But Brian hit the nail on the head. We definitely, the timing of when Brian I got an email from him and I was like, wow, I haven't heard from you in a really long time. But I think that goes back to sort of how when relationships are built, when work in the community is done and what that impact has, we remembered, and I don't want to speak for you, but we remembered sort of the work that we had done in another community, seeing things sort of happen. I think there's things that can be lasting in impressions. And so opening a door or reopening a door and saying, hey, why don't you come in and see? And I knew Brian his I'm going to say out of the box thinking at times and pushing things. And so I said, I really think you need to come see what we're doing. And just really timing is everything. And meeting people where they are. So, the conversation started with come see what we're doing. And then it was, tell me what ASML is looking to do and what they're trying to accomplish by partnering with someone in the community. How can we help with that? And how can we leverage the impact? It's a two-way street, right? So yes, we love the support from ASML because our kids are now getting access to STEM opportunities, but how can we be a value add to ASML as well? Because it's both ways.
So what is this STEM lab? Let's go, tell us how often is this being used? What's it's being used for?
Yeah, it's evolving. We use this lab in this space. It's actually a room that's two spaces that can be one large space, but we're using it every day in our after school program. So we have about 50 to 75 kids, depending on the day, that are coming in regularly to use our space. We have, with our partnership with ASML, we've been able to now train our staff to implement a lot of the different things some of the things you see on the tables here, robot arms. We've done hydroponics. We've done a whole bunch of different things that are around STEM, art, sort of mechanics, engineering, all of that stuff. And we're challenging our kids to learn. It could be an experiment. It could be a problem to solve. It could be a challenge. And working in groups, working separately, all of that happens in our after school program. Then we're also including our teens and even our little preschoolers are starting to understand what's happening. And so it's sort of sky's the limit. We've started with really a structured format and some programs and curriculum, but it's evolving. And the coolest part about that is we also bring ASML in. So their staff, their teams come in and volunteer. And so they're going to help us also evolve what that looks like and the access for what our kids are learning.
So on the surface, ASML provided funding.
Sure.
And tell us, it's much more than that.
It goes so much deeper than that. For us, we fundamentally believe that, we want to build partnerships, right? Like we don't want to have a transactional relationship with our community partners. It's not enough for us to write a check, slap our logo on something and walk away from it, right? Like we want to see it at the table. And, this entire process has been incredibly hands-on for us, working through the funding proposals, kind of, working with Sabrina and her team to really understand and identify and think, long term, right? This is a multi-year funding, initiative. It's not a one and done sort of thing. So, one of the things that I love about this is a very granular detail, but the collective team that was working on this had the vision to, build funds into this to replenish materials over time, right? Because we know kids are not necessarily gentle with some of these materials, and we want to make sure that we're updating and refreshing as time goes on. So, for us, it's very much we're in it for the long haul, and we do have aspirations to increase the amount of time that our staff are spending here and to really help shape and influence and guide the youth here, because the skills that they're learning in this lab are the skills that will help elevate them to jobs and career success when they leave the Boys and Girls Club. And, perhaps some of them will become future ASML employees, perhaps not. But again, the skills that they're learning are incredibly transferable for their futures.
Yeah. And so the ASML staff are coming here.
Yes.
and helping and really working with these kids.
We have dates scheduled through the first 2 quarters of 2025. Yeah, absolutely.
And what's that like for the employees?
They love it. They love it. They're thirsty for these opportunities. And, I think one of the lovely things that ASML does for our staff is we provide 8 hours of PTO time for all full-time employees to volunteer in the community. That's a wonderful benefit. But our staff are really busy, like a lot of other people in the world. And, unless you create the opportunities, a lot of times that 8 hours would go unused. And so one of the things that I learned very quickly in my role was that I had to create those opportunities. And so when Sabrina talks about, the partnership going 2 ways and helping each other meet our own respective goals, that is one of our goals, is to increase the amount of time that our staff are spending, not only here at Wakeman Boys and Girls Club, but at other nonprofit organizations in the community. And certainly Sabrina and her team have been great advocates and partners in helping us to achieve that.
And so we're going to show some video because we have the kids coming in and going to show us some of this equipment, but tell us what's in here.
Yeah, I'm actually not the expert. I need to start coming in too. But we have a lot of different things. We have 3D printers. We have access to. We haven't actually, I think, gotten the drones moving around yet. But we've got robotic arms. We have other sort of programmable, challenging things that are like helping just sort of from a coding standpoint, right? So there's and they have the coolest part of this is we partnered with a company that helps write some curriculum so that we're able to, like our staff, we have a lot of part-time staff. They are not always experts. Like we'd love to have ASML team members with us every day. But we needed to be able to start foundationally for our kids. So a lot of the things that we have are able to build upon. And so it's a problem. It's a challenge of the day. Kids can learn. It could be, how do you get this robot to go from point A to point B? It could be, we want, you can see some of the arms here. They have different grippers. It's stacking versus picking up versus moving from one place to another. And all of those have coding and mathematical challenges behind them and problem solving. And so we're creating those environments for the kids. It could be, hey, we want to put something together on the 3D printer. We actually put gifts together when we did our grand opening, and the kids helped program that, and they helped understand design and sort of format. And so it's the challenge at hand, but it's also more than that. And we put the kids in teams. So sometimes these projects don't go the way they planned, right? And I think that sometimes is even the more exciting part of it, because our kids are learning in a just sort of a day-to-day environment that isn't scripted, but is helping them learn how to solve the problem, deal with conflict, have two potential teammates with them who may have different ideas. Like, so how do you navigate through that? How do you figure out how you're going to get to your end result as a group, and when it doesn't go the right way or when it does? I mean, we have some videos, and I've seen it in action where they've gone from, they have a little car that you can sort of see this track here. So that little guy over there will move. And when it gets to here, the kids are just jumping and screaming and like high-fiving each other.
Such a sense of accomplishment.
Teamwork. And that's what happens in the workforce, right? Like we're all like, there's individual tasks that we have to do, but you still have to work together, right? And it's kids coming from different schools, different backgrounds, potentially different communication skills, whether that's language or just their own environment, right? Like what someone could be very introverted, someone can be very extroverted. Now we're putting them all together. How do you learn how to work together? Sports is another way to do that, but science, math, technology, and problem solving is a completely the same skill set with a different medium.
And I think it's amazing because when you have the opportunity to see the students and the kids in this space, they look like they're playing. But they're learning. They're actively learning. They're, as Sabrina said, they're problem solving. They're, taking skills that they may have developed in the classroom and they're applying them to real life scenarios. And it is absolutely, magic. It's just great to see.
And that's why for the employees, it's so nice to be like kind of that giving back, but then also seeing this practical, learning that's going on. And it's probably fun for them as well.
Oh, absolutely. They love it. They love it. I mean, when we had the ribbon cutting ceremony, I don't know who was having more fun, whether it was the kids or our staff, and they were collaborating. They were in the same space. And I think that that's also a very cool and powerful thing for any company to be able to do with their community partners, especially when you're talking about the next generation of our workforce. When the students here have the opportunity to engage with ASML employees, they see themselves reflected in our workforce. And, again, they may not become our next generation of engineers and manufacturers, but they're still seeing someone who looks like them. They're seeing somebody who comes from a similar background as them. And if they can do it, so can you. And I love that sort of secondary benefit to giving back to our community.
Yeah, and it's not like, some of these kids could have parents that work at ASML and they see them on the soccer field, but they don't really make that association. But when they're in here playing with robots, now they're really starting to think about, this is a real career and, this is what it looks like. And here's someone who's from my community. And
you don't have to go to the other side of the country to have these job opportunities. I think that's another powerful message, is that ASML is here. You can have a world-class career in science and technology in your own backyard without having to leave Fairfield County. Yeah, and that's pretty incredible for the kids to know that these opportunities exist. Absolutely. When you hear through conversation and the response from the community members, the work that we're doing and the impact that we're having in the region is just really, really gratifying. And it's something that I think we can all hopefully celebrate and get behind and support. Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this and so many benefits for everybody involved, right? From the kids to all of the employees at ASML and really just the greater community in this area. What do you think makes this partnership so successful?
There's been a lot of intentionality around this. And yes, the relationship started with Brian and I, but it's our teams that have been part of this, right? So our team had put together a proposal and conversations, and that was a 3-month to 6-month conversation in regular meetings, and that helped develop relationships, right? So there's trust, there's conversation, there's trial and error. Like, we're creating that environment that we create that I just talked about, we're creating for the kids. So our program staff, our resource development staff team, all of us it was a group effort. And I think the intentionality of in the check-ins and the conversation and the ongoing work allows us to strengthen and develop that relationship. And it builds, I say this all the time, relationships form at the speed of trust. And so there has to be a give and take on both ways, in transparency and honesty and all. Hey, we thought this was going to work. And we talked about this. I feel like we're just at the beginning of what we're already been talking about, hey, sky's the limit. And because we've created this really great foundational trust and relationship at the beginning, we're going to be able to push each other in ways of hey, have we thought about this? Hey, guess what? We thought this was going to work. It's not. This is how we want to pivot. And again, I think we want to be good stewards of the funding, the time, the treasure, and the talent that we're getting and receiving from ASML, because we feel that we have an obligation to make sure that they're getting the best investment, but also for us, right? And so that I think it comes down to some intentionality, planning, building trust. And yes, some things can be transactional, but we both went into this being transformational, right? And so how are we going to move that needle? How are we going to measure some outcomes? How are we going to keep pushing that? And I think talking about it in a way, you said this right in the beginning, this is the intention is a long-term relationship. We don't know what that is, right? And that's okay.
That's the beautiful thing about this, right? We are in a STEM lab and makerspace, but it's really an incubator for
all this other
stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. I had and we talked a little bit about this before, but I had the really cool opportunity. It just happened to be, I was visiting Amsterdam, and in the Netherlands, I got to go see ASML's headquarters. And while I was there, it was, again, another opportunity to hey, how are you doing this? We're looking at stuff in the Netherlands about working with youth in a different way. Can I get your input on this? And again, we just evolved another sort of relationship. And I think that's exciting. It's sort of sky's the limit.
It's such a unique partnership. It really is, but one that is so, so strong. Are there any, in getting this this makerspace STEM lab up and running, were there any hurdles that you kind of learned from right away that you think would be, helpful to share for other people?
I think, I don't want to say it was smooth sailing. Like it's always sort of learning. And, sometimes I think you always have to be cognizant of time. Like we want to push timelines and limits. And like, I think you have to be patient sometimes to sort of let it happen. And I think, and again, being transparent on that, it was like, hey, like, I think by the time we sort of got to a certain point, we were like at the end of the summer and we were like, all right, well, we're not launching this as we're wrapping up summer and we hadn't opened sort of school year yet, but it all worked out. I think, because we are partnering with an organization and a company that has done some of this work before, and we are not new, right? We had experience to say, you know what, we were able to lay some of this out in front and sort of jump through some of those hoops or barriers and sort of prepare for that. But I think the intentionality around us wanting to make sure this is sustainable, like we built in staff time and training time and things of that to be able to be successful. Cause we don't want a whole bunch of stuff just sitting in a room, right? Like we want it to be used all the time. So I think that was helpful. The timing was really great in sort of this building getting open in time and things of that nature. So I would say the barriers around just planning ahead of time for that, you're gonna need time to prepare, learn. Those would be things, whether they're barriers to just be aware of, right? Like it's okay. And I don't mean like over promise, under deliver, or under promise, over deliver. Just be realistic, right? And say like, does this work? Are we going to be able to do this or not? What's the timeline? Like because I think ultimately you guys want us to be successful too, And so it's like, wait, does this work? Does this not? Oh yeah, it does, and again, it's just having that open dialogue. And I say, I'm not the one who had all that dialogue. That was our team, right? Like both of us, I think, have amazing teams, that are willing to work. And because ultimately it's about the kids, right? Like what's that experience? And that just sort of like pushes everybody to do what needs to be done.
I think agility is a really important skill in these types of relationships because despite, your best laid plans, things are inevitably going to get delayed, right? Like we've all been through construction processes and all of this stuff, but, our eagerness, I think, to get this space outfitted and to open up this space for the kids was just so incredibly powerful. And it was really, any challenge, any sort of minor bump in the road was just addressed very quickly. And I do think that it was an incredibly smooth process. Like I can't honestly think of one major issue that came up. But, you are also entering a new partnership with an organization. And so it does require some understanding to learn what those internal processes are for things that are as, maybe, our procurement process at ASML is different than the procurement process here at the Boys and Girls Club. So it's just those types of things that you just naturally learn through a business partnership.
Were there anything that surprised you the most? Maybe like how quickly the kids would jump onto this stuff, or what were some of the biggest surprises?
That didn't surprise me. I think our ribbon cutting ceremony and the grand opening, and the engagement from the ASML teams. I think I knew I sort of had an idea, but to see it in action, and like when are we coming back? I mean, again, we had done some stuff in the summer with some field trips and things of that nature. But I think I call it almost like a reset. Like we send our teams out to trainings or conferences and things like that. I feel like that was sort of like what that was for ASML team members. It was like a reset button sometimes. So like whatever was going on at work or home in their day, they got to be here and got to, like, you could just see like the light bulbs go off, or like the light in their eyes and the kids. And I think that just like, it goes, oh, that makes it all worth it. Right. And again, not that this was really super hard or like we had to like climb over all these barriers, but just to see that, it's like, yes,
incredibly
it's like,
rewarding.
It just very intrinsically and externally, all of the things, right? It's like, this is why we're doing it. And it's happening on both sides, right? Like, so that's a really true partnership that can really be sky's the limit.
In terms of surprises, I can't say that there were too many surprises, but just incredible amounts of delight through the entire process. To Sabrina's point, having some of my colleagues from the Netherlands be present here for the ribbon cutting ceremony, some of who have never been to Bridgeport or Fairfield County before, was just an awesome experience because they got to see the work firsthand that I've been doing here in the region. And for some of them, they're decision makers when it comes to funding for an organization like this. And, I pitch ideas, I present reports, and, a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint is never going to be as powerful as being present in a community. And that for me was probably one of the most rewarding parts of this journey. I was also really incredibly impressed with STEM education works. Like they're sort of providing hands-on training for the staff here at Boys and Girls Club. Sabrina had mentioned them earlier, and just the level of interest that they have for this community and their willingness to cater the curriculum to the needs of our children and our community, I think was just really inspiring and very, very cool.
So if there's people listening who are interested in getting involved or have, a similar partnership that they're ready to jump into, what advice do you have for them?
I think it's always partnerships they can be different, right? Like every partnership is not going to be the same. I think for me as a leader of a nonprofit organization, one of the best things I've learned is to listen. And so when you're bringing your partners together, listen to the other, you may have your own agenda of like what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, but listening to the other partner and understanding where they are at will help formulate that. I think, Brian talked about being agile and having agility, but I think it's really listening, meeting people where they are, and being okay with the end, like sort of the end result being unknown. That's part of it. But I think you have to be flexible. You have to understand. You have to be transparent. Trust is super important. You have to be patient. Because sometimes the timing doesn't always work out, but it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And open, right? So being open to changing an idea or being flexible is super important, because if you go in with a pre-existing agenda, you're not going to get the end result you're looking for.
You could have never imagined that this is what the outcome would have been when you guys had those initial back and forth emails?
Not at all. I'll tell you, like the email came and I was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't heard from Brian in a long time. Wait a minute. And it's sort of those things. And,
you were again, like, you still live here?
Like, and I was like, wait a minute. I think I know, but it goes back to like, and I'll use this as an example. Brian and I met because we were in a leadership program together, right? And we were both in different organizations. I was in a similar type of organization, but we were sort of, you said this, starting our careers, sort of launching. And I'm like, that's almost, I don't even want to count how many years ago that was. But there was an impression there, and we were in a space where we were like-minded. So we already knew how to speak that language. It doesn't always happen that way. And that's why I say you have to be patient. You have to meet people where they are, because we had already gone through that sort of, I don't want to say courting phase, but we got to know each other, right? Yeah. In new relationships, you got to get to know each other, and you have to be, there's give and take, it's not my way or the highway, because that's not how we move the needle forward.
And I think for businesses who are looking to build similar partnerships, I think they really have to think about their core values, right? And, making sure that partnerships such as this align with those values in a meaningful way. Because if it's not meaningful, it's not going to be successful. And I think there's a level of authenticity that I think is really, really important for this. I also firmly believe that every organization, no matter the size, has something to give. And sometimes that requires just picking up the phone and making a cold call. And I know that a lot of people don't love doing that these days, but you never know who's going to pick up, and you never know what relationships can be created by picking up the phone, reaching out, going to, meetings at your local chamber of commerce and networking and doing all of those things. And also looking through your Rolodex to see some folks that you might know from your past who have opportunities that align with what you're looking for.
Sometimes now that's just like scrolling through LinkedIn too, right?
Yeah, well, Rolodex, LinkedIn. I mean, I'm obviously dating myself. I do not have a Rolodex. Everything is digital, believe me. But I mean, you have to kind of think back about, the people who you've enjoyed working with in the past that have had an influence on your career and, how you might be able to partner again.
Well, I think this whole project, I mean, this is really just the start of this partnership, but it is so inspiring and so great to see this happening in a community here in Bridgeport where there's so many partners involved. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We're, excited to learn more and continue to watch this partnership evolve, but it's really just amazing to see this facility and what you've done here.
Well, thanks for having us. We enjoy being able to talk about all the great things, and I can't wait for you guys to see some of the kids in action because that's really where the fun comes, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. And as always, for a full list of episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.